I was really hoping it wouldn't come to this, but now that Pokemon video game prices have truly gotten out of control, I feel the need to make a video on it. In addition to being a pretty big Pokemon fan, I'd also consider myself to be an experienced video game collector and general player of most video games. Basically, I'm not your typical Pokemon YouTuber that only really plays Pokemon and maybe dabbles in a couple other types of games. In this video, I'll be going over why Pokemon video game prices are currently out of control, what you should be doing as a buyer or seller of these games, and lastly, my personal feelings on this whole ordeal. So, whenever someone asks me why I think Pokemon video game prices are rising, I tell them it's the perfect combination of 4 different things. The first and most obvious reason is the worldwide Pokerus situation we've been facing. When this started last year, we saw a huge increase in pretty much all video game prices. Actually, there was an increase in popularity for every type of hobby. Anything that can help you pass the time became much more in demand. I for one even picked up skateboarding as a hobby, before quitting it soon after because I decided I didn't like falling so much. Even though the peak of Pokerus is hopefully past us, the prices on most video games have yet to return to normal. But unlike how the prices on a lot of other video games peaked last summer, Pokemon games instead just felt a small bump before drastically going up at the start of this year. So it's clear that Pokemon games are something of a special case, even among the rising prices most other desirable video games have faced. This brings me to the second reason why I believe Pokemon video game prices have gotten out of control: the recent resurgence in popularity of the Pokemon trading card game. While the Pokemon video games have always been popular, the Pokemon trading card game has mostly been pretty comparable to other trading card games in terms of popularity after Pokemania died out. But with the power of YouTube, one man by himself has reignited the passion for obtaining these cards again. Yes, what I'm getting at is that Logan Paul is partly responsible for the current increase in Pokemon video game prices. I have never seen people so eager to get their hands on Pokemon cards before. Whenever a listing of Pokemon cards pops up locally on Facebook Marketplace, it's almost immediately gone soon after. It doesn't even matter what type of Pokemon cards they are. I've seen people trade brand new PS5s for Pokemon card collections. People are basically trying everything they can think of to get Pokemon cards. The sad part is most of these people see these cards as more of an investment rather than trading cards to play in a game or to purely collect. And basically, the popularity of Pokemon cards has carried over to the older Pokemon games. Now, these people that are on the search for Pokemon cards are also on the search for Pokemon games, which are potentially even easier to come by. I'll explain more what I mean later in this video. For this next reason, I'd first like to talk about how certain video game systems become desirable approximately 20 or so years after they release. As some of you may know, right now GameCube games are really hot. PS2 and original Xbox games are actually also in this category, but their libraries are much more spread out, so it's harder to see the crazy price increases you'd see with most GameCube games. Basically, the kids that grew up with the 6th generation of video game consoles are now in their mid-20s and have disposable income. They're nostalgic for the games they grew up playing and are now trying to buy back a piece of their childhood. This type of trend happens with almost every console. N64 games experienced their nostalgia phase a couple years ago and were on a downward trajectory before Pokerus hit. And NES and SNES games have been on the decline for several years. Right now we're experiencing that same wave of nostalgic adults like me who grew up playing the GBA and DS Pokemon games, but mainly the DS ones. Unlike the people who are now trying to buy back those Pokemon games, I thankfully held on to all mine from my childhood. I guess I'm also pretty lucky that my parents never pressured me into getting rid of them, or to sell them at a garage sale to try and make some cash for other interests at the time. In fact, my parents are the type that always want me to get the most value out of the toys they buy for me. Even with other toys I'm no longer interested in, they tell me, well, we're keeping it for your children to play with because we paid an arm and a leg for it. I even clearly remember my mom buying me Pokemon Fire Red when it was new, and she didn't understand why a game so small could be worth $50. She just told me I better enjoy it, and enjoy it a lot. That I definitely did. I can't even begin to think of how many hours I've poured into that game cartridge. It even mistakenly went through the wash a couple times and it still looks pretty good. Anyways, that's my off-topic rant for this video. The final reason why I believe older Pokemon game prices in particular are currently out of control is because of the state of modern Pokemon games. Ever since the shift to 3D, the video games just haven't been the same. The general consensus seems to be that X and Y was the start of lower quality Pokemon games, and a ton of newer Pokemon fans are now taking a first look at the older games to see what all the hype's about. If I were to name the top 3 most hyped up Pokemon games on YouTube, it would be Pokemon Black 2 White 2, Pokemon HeartGold SoulSilver, and Pokemon Platinum. And what do you know, when we look at the 3 most expensive mainline Pokemon games, it's exactly those 3. Unlike fans of Zelda or Mario, Pokemon fans typically have to look back on the past to find high quality experiences. I feel like we wouldn't see the crazy prices for some of these games if Sword and Shield was better received. Even if Nintendo ported some of the older Pokemon games to Switch, that would also help tame these prices. For example, the price of Super Mario Sunshine was creeping up early last year, just like most GameCube games, but then immediately plummeted when 3D All-Stars was announced. Ports and remasters are great because they pretty much guarantee that the original release of a game never becomes too expensive. Sure, there's some outliers, but generally speaking, a game like The Last of Us on PS3 will always remain $5 to $10 because the PS4 release pretty much replaces it as the version to have. Now that I've gotten the reasons why this is happening out of the way, time to talk about the fun stuff. What should you be doing as a buyer or seller of these games? I feel like a lot of people buying these games right now are doing so from fear of them increasing in price even more over time. And while I can understand your fear, especially if you look at how fast they've increased in such a short amount of time, I'm going to tell you right now that you are buying these games at possibly the worst time for prices we'll ever see. These prices are 100% not normal and will not be this high for much longer. Give it a year or two, especially if Pokérus becomes a thing of the past, and you'll see these prices drop right down to where they were before this whole thing started. While I'm not so confident in giving that same assessment to other more niche or collectible games that have also seen a price increase, I'm very confident in my future analysis of these Pokemon game prices. Why, you might ask, am I so confident in this? It's because these games sold extremely well. Pokemon Black 2 White 2, HeartGold SoulSilver, and Platinum are all comfortably in the top 15 best-selling DS games. And I don't even need to mention Diamond Pearl and Black White because those games are easily in the top 10. Like, it just blows my mind that some of you, yes, some of you watching this very video, are willing to spend $200 plus on a game that sold more copies than most countries have people. I can sort of understand people paying $100 for Chrono Trigger DS, since it's the best version of a widely acclaimed RPG that is already expensive enough to get, but y'all are paying $200 plus on a game that has sold 7 times as much. And I get it, some of you will wisely point out that it's not just any game, it's Pokemon Platinum, and by the rules of supply and demand, it could be that Pokemon Platinum is just that much more sought after than Chrono Trigger DS. But what you all fail to realize is just how easy it is to find these games if your eyes aren't glued to eBay all the time. Let's say you have a friend or relative that has a bunch of DS games they don't use anymore. In fact, let's say they have exactly 15 of them. If you're to bet on which 15 games they have without knowing their particular interests and assuming they don't have duplicates, you're pulling up this list. And since 5 of those 15 games are Pokemon games, you have an extremely good chance of finding an $100 game because that's the current market price of Pokemon Pearl, the least expensive of the top 5. As you can begin to imagine, Pokemon DS games are currently the perfect target for video game resellers. And just as a wake-up call to some of you in the back, pretty much all the copies of expensive Pokemon games you're seeing on eBay are from regular video game resellers, whether they be full-time or part-time. AKA, they're finding Pokemon games for basically nothing, locally at garage sales, Craigslist, Kijiji, and Facebook Marketplace being the big one. Then they're reselling them on eBay for huge profit margins. Just like your mom or dad may have sold your childhood video games at a garage sale for basically nothing, the same thing is still happening and resellers are taking advantage of it to the fullest. And while I may be painting a nasty image of video game resellers right now, don't get me wrong, you're free to buy and resell whatever you want. It's really the seller's fault for not doing research on items before they put them for sale, especially in modern times where these market prices are only a few smartphone taps away. If you don't believe how easy it is to find these games for cheap in the wild, I'll just share some of my local pickups from this past year. 1 copy of Pokémon Blue, 1 copy of Pokémon Silver, 1 copy of Pokémon Crystal, 1 copy of Pokémon Ruby, 1 copy of Pokémon Emerald, 1 copy of Pokémon Fire Red, 1 copy of Pokémon Leaf Green, 2 copies of Pokémon Diamond, 5 copies of Pokémon Pearl, 4 complete in box, 1 loose, 1 copy of Pokémon Platinum, 1 copy of Pokémon SoulSilver complete in box, 1 copy of Pokémon White complete in box, 3 copies of Pokémon Black 2 complete in box, 2 copies of Pokémon White 2, 1 complete in box, 1 loose, and some Pokémon 3DS games, but those aren't really worth mentioning since they're not too expensive to begin with. All those pickups were from Facebook Marketplace. It's the best place to find deals on video games since your parents use it to sell their stuff because they already have a Facebook profile, and we all know how eager some of your parents are to get rid of your old stuff. I typically buy bundles of video game items on Marketplace, keeping the games I want and selling the games I don't want or already have in order to recuperate the costs. If you're an experienced video game collector like me, you know that this is pretty much the only affordable way to build up large video game collections in this day and age. If I were to spend market price on every game I wanted, I wouldn't get too far. And that actually brings up a good point. What if you aren't someone who buys a ton of video games, and you just want to spend the single-time $200 purchase to get Pokémon HeartGold without any other hassle involved? Thinking about it that way makes a lot more sense to me why so many people would be willing to spend that amount of money on these games. But I gotta ask, why now? Is there really such an urgency to buy these games that you need to do it at possibly the worst time ever? You've only had like 10 plus years. Look, this is my advice for those of you that want to get these games right now. Get an R4 or emulate the games, just so you can scratch that itch. Then, when prices eventually come down, you can buy yourself a legit version if that's something you're still interested in doing at that point in time. Like I just said, the games have only been out for 10 plus years. Why are you so eager to get a physical copy right now? I actually do this for older games I'm not sure about quite often. I'll pirate the game, and if I like it after an hour or 2 of playing, I'll buy an official copy. That's what I did with Persona 3 Portable, and now I have a ton of Persona games. Most of them bought new through Atlus's official Amazon store. So that's an example where pirating a game can actually indirectly be good for a company. Moving on to the other side of the coin, let's talk about what you should be doing as a seller of these games. Pretty obviously, you should be selling them now. Don't wait any longer, thinking the values will increase even more, because the prices for a lot of these games are starting to plateau. Prices are already pretty ridiculous as it is, so it's best to take advantage of them before eBay becomes any more overpopulated with these games. That's what I've been noticing this past month or so. Resellers and collectors alike are now digging through their games and posting them for sale to try to capitalize on this hot market. But the large supply of these games is starting to show itself, and the demand is slowly being satisfied with every copy sold. I'm not sure how much more expensive these Pokemon games can get before reaching its true peak, so it's best to sell now and not take any chances. Although the market value of these games are determined by people's willingness to spend said value, I actually think that in the case of Pokemon games, scummy sellers can play a small role in inflating that price even more. Whenever I resell games, I always post them for much lower than eBay prices. So in that sense, I'd like to think I'm what you might consider more of an ethical reseller. Whereas the prices I've seen posted from some of these other resellers are outrageous. If the average going price for Pokemon Platinum cartridge only is $150, you always see sellers posting it for way more. That's typical for anything on eBay, but for Pokemon games it's especially bad because the market for them is so volatile right now. You'll see one listing sold for $200, and then the listing right after you'll see sell for $156, and then down to $70, and then back up to $188, so on and so forth. Compare that to the more niche games that are typically desired by veteran collectors, and the sold prices are all fairly consistent. And that's because, like I've explained earlier, most of the people buying Pokemon games at these crazy prices aren't particularly thinking about stuff like getting a deal, or if they'd be better off waiting. And for the sellers, I get it. If you're selling a game, you might as well try to get the most money out of it as possible. But it still leaves such a bad taste in my mouth to see it for these Pokemon games. With all that said, let me talk about my personal opinion on this whole ordeal and how it affects me. As you probably can tell, I'm not too happy about these current prices. I bought all these games on release day, so obviously it's not like I'm worried about never getting them. But that doesn't mean this doesn't affect me. Do you know how much of a pain traveling with hundreds of dollars worth of video games in your bag is, for example? The main reason I've actually modded my PS Vita was so that I wouldn't have to carry around those expensive game cartridges. What if I lose a game or it breaks and I want to get a replacement in the future? Unlike some people, I never left my Pokemon phase and are only now returning. These Pokemon games are something I've always liked and probably always will like. From the words of my mom, your kids and your grandkids will play with your toys. But naturally, not everyone keeps the games they collect like I do. Even the most hardcore collectors can sell off their games if that chapter in their life ends and they have new interests they want to put that money towards. Most of the people currently panic buying Pokemon games, or even more generally, most of the people that have started video game collecting during Pokerus, probably won't have that same enthusiasm for owning these games down the line when real life takes over. I recently reconnected with a friend I grew up playing the DS Pokemon games with, and I was shocked to learn that he was excited to sell all his childhood Pokemon games now because they're worth a lot. That's his choice and I respect it. But for me personally, it doesn't matter how expensive these games are, I'll never sell my personal copies because that's kinda like selling part of my life away. And that's because when I look at these games, I see the game itself and the adventures within it. But this past year it's been harder and harder for many people to not think of the value before thinking about the actual game. I call this the Earthbound Effect, where when someone brings up the game, everyone immediately thinks about how valuable it is before thinking of what the game is actually about. It's to the point where a lot of collectors desire games simply because of their infamous value and nothing else. The best example of this would be Little Samson on NES. You can bet most collectors that have a copy don't even know what's past the first stage. Heck, they probably haven't even put it into their Nintendo from fear of the board getting damaged. I just find it annoying how these games that I really enjoy and should be able to be affordably experienced by others are instead prime targets for resellers. But again, resellers flock to wherever the demand is, and the demand for Pokemon games is currently abnormally high because of a culmination of unfortunately timed events. So the next time you're thinking of hitting the buy it now button on that overpriced copy of Pokemon HeartGold, consider what I've said in this video. You'll probably come across a cheaper copy of the game sooner than you think.